The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown apartment, painting streaks of gold over the sleek glass desk where my laptop hummed softly. I sipped my oat milk latte, feeling the smooth silk of my blouse brush against my skin. Everything about this morning whispered success, my calendar perfectly color-coded, my emails organized, my life seemingly perfect. Then my phone buzzed. An email from an unexpected sender, James Caldwell. My heart skipped. James, the man who had mocked my college degree, who had scoffed at my overambitious plans years ago, was reaching out. I stared at the message. He needed help. Of course he did. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who laughed at my education now needed me for a business deal. A smile tugged at my lips, soft but knowing. I felt a quiet, simmering pride. I leaned back, letting the leather chair cradle me, and allowed myself a small, guilty thrill. I could help him, or I could just watch him squirm. But that wasn't my style anymore. I'd grown, built my own empire quietly, and kept the scars of ridicule hidden beneath polished composure. Today, all those years of underestimation would meet reality. Years ago, I had been so eager, so full of hope. Fresh out of college, degree in hand, dreams too big for the cramped office cubicle I first walked into. James Caldwell, my manager at the time, had greeted me with a smirk that still stung whenever I remembered it. "You spent 4 years doing this?" he'd asked, flipping through my resume like it was a bad joke. The words hit harder than I expected. My stomach knotted, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the edge of my desk. I wanted to argue, to prove him wrong, but my voice faltered. The laughter from the surrounding team only made it worse. I had felt small, invisible, dismissed for daring to dream beyond the bottom line. I remember walking home that evening, rain soaking my trench coat, and gripping the small silver charm my grandmother had given me. An owl, tiny and delicate, engraved with the words, "Knowledge is your power, even when others doubt it." I had clutched it like a lifeline. That night, I made a decision. I could let the mockery define me, or I could use it as fuel. I would learn, grow, and rise, quietly, methodically. No loud declarations, no need to impress the ones who had doubted me. I would prove it, but on my terms. In the weeks that followed, I spent late nights at the library, enrolling in online courses, expanding my skill set, learning the languages of finance and entrepreneurship that James had mocked me for not knowing. I shadowed mentors, absorbed every lesson I could, and sometimes I cried in silence, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of catching up. But every small win, every project completed, every new skill mastered, was a silent victory against the ridicule that had stung so sharply. By the time I decided to take the leap into my own ventures, I was a different person. Determined, confident, and fiercely protective of the promise I had made to myself. I would never be belittled again. The charm rested in my palm, warm with reassurance. It had become more than jewelry. It was a symbol of my resilience, the quiet witness to the woman I was becoming. After leaving the small corporate office that had made me feel invisible, I started from scratch. I rented a modest apartment downtown, the kind with creaky floors and peeling paint, and transformed it into my personal lab for growth. My days blurred into nights, researching markets, learning digital strategy, and pitching ideas to anyone who would listen. Every rejection stung, but every small yes fueled me further. It was during one of these long nights at a local co-working space that I met Claire Donovan, a seasoned investor with a sharp eye for talent. Claire saw potential where others saw raw ambition. "You don't need them to believe in you," she told me one evening, leaning back in her chair and studying my notes with a wry smile. "You need to believe in yourself enough to make them irrelevant." Those words sank deep, echoing the wisdom my grandmother had whispered through the charm that now hung around my neck. I threw myself into building my first venture, a boutique consultancy for small businesses. The early days were brutal. I worked 12, 14 hours a day, juggling spreadsheets, marketing strategies, and cold calls while fighting a gnawing doubt that whispered I wasn't ready, wasn't enough. I had no safety net. Every misstep felt catastrophic, yet every tiny victory, landing a first client, getting a referral, seeing my modest revenue grow, was a reminder that I was capable. I learned to celebrate small wins privately. I didn't post photos of my office, my clients, or my growing bank statements. Social media saw curated glimpses of a modest life, while behind closed doors, I transformed into a powerhouse, quietly outpacing everyone who had underestimated me. The contrast gave me a secret thrill, the kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you are succeeding on your own terms. Over the next few years, my ventures multiplied. I expanded into financial services, investments, and strategic funding for small companies. The irony was delicious. I became a silent force behind projects that others, including James Caldwell, had scoffed at when I suggested their potential. I hired a talented team, mentored young women like me, and refined my approach to leadership, compassionate but firm, innovative yet grounded. Through it all, I never let pride blind me. The lessons of my past, the sting of mockery, the loneliness of early nights, remained as fuel rather than poison. The charm from my grandmother rested on my desk as a constant reminder. Knowledge, resilience, and quiet strategy would always outlast derision. And all the while, I kept my biggest secret close, the knowledge that one day, those who had mocked me, especially James, would have to confront the truth. That thought, sweet and patient, carried me through long hours, through every stumble and setback, until the day I was finally ready for the confrontation. The day James Caldwell walked into my office, I let him pause for a moment at the threshold. His eyes swept the room, polished hardwood floors, walls adorned with contemporary art, a library of business and leadership books meticulously arranged, and a large oak desk that gleamed under the afternoon sunlight. He looked around as if he had entered a world entirely foreign to him, one he hadn't imagined I could create. I stood, letting the quiet hum of my office speak before I did. My tailored blazer fit perfectly, my hair styled in effortless waves, my confidence radiating in the way I held myself. James cleared his throat nervously, a stark contrast to the arrogant smirk I remembered from years ago. Bella, he began, hesitating as he tried to read my expression. I need your help with a new project funding. I allowed a slow, deliberate smile. Funding, huh? I leaned against my desk, crossing my arms. Interesting how things come full circle. He frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. I don't understand. You're running your own firm? I tilted my head slightly, letting the suspense linger. Not just my own firm, I said softly. I fund multiple ventures now. Your little startup idea? It's exactly the kind of project I support financially, strategically, and yes, you'll be needing my investment. The color drained from his face. I could see it. The disbelief, the shame, the realization that the woman he had mocked for her inadequate education had become the person controlling his very future. Bella, he stammered, but I held up a hand. Let me finish. I walked him through the story, careful not to gloat. Every word a measured revelation. The boutique consultancy, the investments, the clients, the empire built quietly, patiently. You thought my degree was irrelevant, I said, letting my voice carry both warmth and steel, but it was my foundation. And now, ironically, you're standing in front of me, reliant on what I've built.
His jaw tightened.
I had no idea. No idea, yes, I said, softening slightly, letting the memory of past ridicule sting in his conscience. I chose not to show you, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to succeed on my terms. And now, here we are. He swallowed hard, eyes darting around the office, taking in the evidence of my journey. The team of professionals I had assembled, the awards subtly displayed, the financial portfolios stacked neatly in folders on the sideboard. He was forced to confront the reality that the girl he had mocked for her education was now the architect of his own opportunity and his dependence. I'll fund your project, I said, my tone calm but commanding, but under my conditions. And don't mistake this for generosity. I expect accountability, professionalism, and respect. The mockery stops here. He nodded slowly, his arrogance replaced by a humbled acknowledgement of a shift in power. The roles had reversed, and I was finally in the position I had envisioned so many years ago, confident, independent, and untouchable by the judgments of my past. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the room settle around us. James Caldwell, once so cocky and dismissive, now shifted nervously in his seat across from me. He knew, without me saying a word, that the balance of power had changed. "Here's the deal," I began, my tone firm but measured. "I will fund your project, but there are conditions. Conditions that, frankly, should have been obvious years ago. But let's start now." He swallowed hard, his ego barely clinging. I continued. "First, accountability. I expect transparency in every financial decision. No excuses, no shortcuts. Mistakes will happen, but dishonesty will not be tolerated. You've learned the hard way that clever words don't replace integrity." James nodded slowly. Relief and apprehension warred across his face. "Yes, I understand." "Second," I said, pausing for effect, "respect. Respect for those around you, your team, your clients, and yes, your mentors. The arrogance that made you laugh at my degree? Leave it at the door. It won't serve you here." His jaw tightened, and I could see the first real signs of humility creeping in. I'll do that. I see now. Third," I added, my voice softening slightly, "growth. You will attend strategy sessions, mentorship programs, and actively work on the areas where you failed. Consider this an opportunity, not punishment." I let the words hang for a moment, allowing him to absorb them. This wasn't revenge. It was empowerment, not just for me, but for him too. I could feel the satisfaction of being in control, but it wasn't bitter. I cared enough to guide him, enough to ensure he learned the lessons he once scoffed at in others. "I will follow your guidance," he whispered, almost reverently. "Good," I said. "One last thing." I reached for the silver charm around my neck and tapped it lightly. "Remember this. Knowledge, preparation, and respect will always outweigh arrogance. You have a chance to rebuild, but only if you're willing to do the work." James nodded, his posture less rigid, his eyes reflecting something I hadn't expected: gratitude. It was strange, seeing someone humbled by the lessons of their own past mistakes, but it felt right. For the first time in years, I felt an unshakable sense of closure. The mockery, the belittlement, the years of underestimation, they had all shaped me, forged me into the woman I had become. And now, with the power to guide and set boundaries, I could ensure that respect, accountability, and growth were more than words. They were the new rules of engagement. I leaned back again, satisfied. My empire wasn't just financial. It was emotional, strategic, and moral. I had survived, thrived, and now I had the chance to shape the narrative of my past, not with vengeance, but with wisdom and control. James cleared his throat softly, offering a tentative smile. I returned it, calm, poised, and utterly in command. Weeks later, the office felt lighter, almost transformed. James Caldwell, once a figure of condescension, now approached meetings with humility and a genuine desire to learn. He asked questions, listened, and, even if grudgingly, acknowledged the value of expertise he had once dismissed. Watching him adapt, I felt no thrill of revenge, only a quiet satisfaction that growth could take root, even in the most unlikely places. I stood by the window of my office, looking out over the city. The skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and I let myself breathe deeply. Years of struggle, of proving myself silently, had led me here. I remembered the charm from my grandmother, the tiny silver owl that had reminded me knowledge was power. It still rested on my desk, gleaming softly, a testament to resilience and patience. I thought of my younger self, trembling at the humiliation, uncertain and overlooked. And now I was here, independent, accomplished, and secure in the knowledge that my worth was undeniable, not because I sought validation from others, but because I had built it, step by step, with sweat, intellect, and integrity. My phone buzzed with messages from clients, updates from my team, and congratulatory notes from young women I mentored. Their successes mirrored my own journey, reminding me that empowerment wasn't just personal, it was contagious. I had created not just financial security, but a ripple effect of confidence and inspiration, extending far beyond my own walls. And in that moment, I allowed myself a small, serene smile. The past, mockery, ridicule, doubt, was no longer a chain. It was the very fuel that had propelled me forward. I had faced the pain, endured the humiliation, and emerged not just victorious, but wise. Compassion and firmness had guided me to a place where strength and grace coexisted seamlessly. I touched the silver owl lightly, feeling the cool metal under my fingers. "Knowledge is power," I whispered softly, echoing my grandmother's words. "And resilience is everything else." From that quiet victory, I knew this was more than a personal triumph. It was the beginning of a legacy. One built on respect, perseverance, and the courage to rise above those who doubted you. And as the city lights began to sparkle, I whispered, almost to myself, a final declaration that carried the weight of every struggle, every triumph, every lesson learned. I am no longer defined by their mockery. I am defined by my strength, my wisdom, and the life I chose to create.